Welcome everyone to Life Beyond 6 Feet. I'm Damien of RKB Paranormal. This week I'm joined by Eric Freeman Sims. He's an investigator and host of the Unseen Paranormal Podcast. Eric, how you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
Not too bad. Just trying to get this thing figured out.
Yeah. The more you do it, the better you'll be.
Well, you're officially our first guest. So thank you for coming on.
Thanks for having me. I love coming on and talking the paranormal. I could talk it 24/7.
Right. Like I said, I've listened to quite a few of your episodes, not just the one we were on, but I've listened to quite a few of them. So, and for anyone that doesn't know, Eric's also in Tennessee. He lives not too far from me. I think he lives out in Fairview. So he's right down the road from us. And I met Eric, what was it, last year at an event at Rosemont? I think in 2021.
I think it was 2 years ago, actually.
2 years ago?
Yeah, 2020, I believe.
It might have been. I can't remember.
That was when I started doing events at Rosemont. So I think yeah.
It might have been. I met you and met Lee and Paula. So I think you guys were actually the first people I've met in the field, other than my teammates and stuff. So y'all have become my first paranormal friends. So that's pretty cool. And
yeah, and you've been nice enough to come out and help us with some events as well.
Yeah, I've been trying. A couple of times I've had to cancel, but I know I've made it to one or two. So I think that's really cool. I mean, I didn't know much about the place we were at, but I just kind of winged it like I'm doing right now. So
yeah, well, I mean, for the most part, you rely on the paranormal to entertain your guest anyway. Hopefully, they show up and entertain your guest. I mean, that's why they bought a ticket, was the experience on the paranormal.
Right.
I've had those nights of doing events where the place is just flat. Even at Rosemont, I had one night we did an event and we just ended up standing around and I told them my ghost stories and things that have happened to me, and then had them tell me their stuff. So hopefully it was still entertaining for them. They still got to see the equipment and how we really investigate, as opposed to like TV. So hopefully it was still entertaining for them to buy a ticket. It seemed like everybody had a good time.
Right. I think a lot of people that do those events, they're just there more or less for the experience and kind of say that they've done that stuff before.
Yeah.
So that's pretty cool. I know a little bit about your backstory for people that may be listening. What got you into the paranormal?
So I had my first experience that I can remember when I was about 7 or 8 years old. I was asleep, and I was one of those weird kids. Most kids like their doors open, or at least cracked. And I was one of those weird kids. Always felt more comfortable with the door shut.
That's how it was.
I sat up straight up in the bed in the middle of the night, and my door was open, and there was a full body apparition in the doorway, kind of glowing white.
Oh wow!
And the age that I was, it scared the shit out of me. So I jumped up, slammed the door, and turned on the light, and that was my first experience. And so that just got me curious, like what did I experience? My house, my parents bought brand new, so it's not. I don't think there's anything attached to the land, anything like that. So as I got older, I became to understand that I'm an empath. And people who are empaths will say it's like you're like a lighthouse in the dark to the paranormal. And so the older I got, the more that I had more and more paranormal experiences. And so when I was a teenager, and this is before any of the ghost shows, ghost hunters, any of those things came out, me and my friends, I didn't even know what a ghost hunter was. We just decided that we were going to go around and go to cemeteries and try to prove to ourselves that the paranormal existed. And we ended up sneaking into a place. I don't condone trespassing, but we ended up sneaking in a place called Carton Plantation in Franklin, Tennessee. Mm-hmm. And I had many experiences there. And then my father passed away when I was 14. And that kind of kicked it into high gear for me to try to dive into research and everything I could. And of course, this is long before Google was a huge thing. And so I'm going to the library, looking up, ghost books and things like that. And then when I was 18, one of my friends bought me a beginner's guide to ghost hunting, I think is the name of the book. And that was the first time I was aware that people actually did this, and there was like a structured way to investigate and that type of stuff. And then the TV shows came out, so that kicked it even more high gear. And it's just kind of been, I've had paranormal experiences kind of my whole life. And a few years ago, it morphed into the podcast, but I had produced another podcast for a few years before then. So kind of doing all the behind the scenes stuff. So I kind of learned podcasting that way. And then in the past few years, I've kind of kicked it into high gear with doing events, hosting events, which I hadn't done, in the 25 years I've been doing this until a few years ago, but having fun with that stuff and investigating but yeah, that's kind of how I got into it, was just having experiences. And then, like I said, when my dad died, just trying to figure out, okay, I hope that, there's something beyond us and he's good, that type of thing.
Right. I mean, we kind of the same way. When I was growing up, I always had all these different things happen, and I was just I wanted to understand how it happened, why it was happening, stuff like that. And so, same thing when I was a teenager. Me and Josh and our other best friend Keith, we would always be out to these cemeteries and investigating that we heard was haunted. And if we heard of an abandoned house that was empty, we heard might have been haunted, we'd, like you said, I don't condone trespassing. We'd break into these houses and
Yeah.
and check it out and shit. So it's kind of a similar start. So those who may not know what an empath is, what would your definition be of an empath?
So not that I don't talk to dead people. I don't see dead people. I'm really good with energy, especially with living people. I read people really, really well. When I first meet them, I know in the first few minutes whether I like them or not. And the best way I can explain it is when I meet somebody who's not necessarily a good person, I guess it's like two magnets repelling. That's kind of what it feels like to me. Is my body is just telling me, get away from this person. This is not good. Or even in a situation. I've been in some situations throughout my life to where I just kind of feel it before something bad happens. My body is like, my intuition is just telling me, yeah, you need to get out of here. It's kind of, I think everybody inherently has some of that empath in them, but mine, for whatever reason, is just stronger than a lot of other people's. But here lately, I've been meeting a lot more empaths as well. And sometimes you just know things you shouldn't know.
Right.
I have no knowledge of things sometimes, but I just kind of know them. It's really weird. And it took me a long time to be comfortable enough to talk about it with people, because it still, to a certain extent, makes me feel like I'm crazy when I talk about it. But now, being as deep in the paranormal world as I am, I'm surrounded by people who kind of understand and don't look at me like I'm crazy or think, oh no, that's not possible. But yeah, the empath, like I said, it's kind of like a lighthouse in the dark for dead people, especially going to haunted locations. They kind of gravitate towards me, and I can kind of feel the air when I go in, and kind of feel the energy when I go into a place, and have an idea based on how that energy feels, whether it's going to be an active night or it's just going to kind of be a slow night.
Right.
And some places have different places have different energy too. The craziest place I've probably felt the energy is probably Octagon Hall. That place just kind of smacks you in the face.
Oh,
You
yeah.
can cut the air with a knife in that place because it's just so heavy for whatever reason.
I don't know what the reason is, but that place is definitely wild. That was my wife's very first investigation. It was a public event, but we kind of got to do our own thing because we told them we were a team and stuff, and it was like every room we went into, like there was some kind of weird shit happening, and we just couldn't. We were still fairly new at that point, and even though we had been into all this stuff, we were still trying to figure out what does all this shit mean and how is this happening. But like I didn't realize like firsthand that something like that could truly affect you until it affected my wife. And so that really stuck with her, and we plan on going back there, I think, next year. Because after that night ended, we were just like, you know what, I don't think we want to come back here for a while. There was just too much really, really odd stuff that went on. And me and my wife finally decided one day last year, we were both off, the kids were gone. I was like, let's drive up to Franklin's, it's 45 minutes from the house. Let's just go up there and just check it out during the day, see if it's a different vibe, different energy. And it felt totally different during the day.
Yeah.
And which, I was like, well, it does feel different. But what was really weird, which I know she's not there anymore. What was her name? Her name was Deborah, I believe it was.
Yeah. I had her on my show talking about Octagon. Yeah.
She let us walk, come in, didn't have to pay or anything. We just got to chatting with her and stuff. And she left us there for a few minutes while she ran down the road to get some lunch. And I was like, that's pretty cool. I was like, most people wouldn't do that. And so whenever she went to leave, she was like, y'all can go wherever you want in the house, just don't go in the basement. I was like, what? And of course, the first thing I wanted to do was go to the basement, but
Right.
of course, with them having cameras set up everywhere else, I'm not going to do that. But it just made me really wonder why we couldn't go in the basement with nobody there. But we plan on going back there next year and actually doing a full investigation, just us. And so we're pretty psyched about that.
Yeah, I had an interesting experience. We went up there to tour the place before we actually investigated, and I didn't really know a whole lot of the history at that time about it. And up in the it's like the hospital room, they had the mannequin set up. Like they got a nurse mannequin. They always creepy mannequins around. If you've never been to Octagon
mannequins
Hall,
are always fucking creepy, man.
Yeah, especially in the dark at 3:00 in the morning. But in that room, I walked up there with another investigator, and we're just looking around, just kind of filling out the energy. And I had my right arm and right leg not numb, but like that pins and needles feeling when your arm or leg's asleep, both at the same time.
Oh wow!
And I was like, that's just weird. I told the other investigator, I was like, I'm feeling this. It's just weird. I've never felt this at a location before. And then another investigator walked upstairs, and she's like, why is my right arm tingling? I'm like, oh, validation. Like it was just one of those validating moments of like, that's so cool when it happens like that you have somebody else. And she wasn't upstairs when I was saying that. So for her to come up independently, kind of feel the same thing was kind of cool.
Yeah.
But yeah, that place is insane. The portal in the basement. If I've ever been to a place that I believe there's a portal, it's definitely Octagon Hall.
I would probably feel the same way, because there's just so much stuff that goes on there, and not just, ghosts. They have accounts of Bigfoot and aliens and all this other stuff, and not to mention the mountain lions and stuff they say roam their property at times too. So
yeah, well, it's the only fucking investigation I've ever been on where they told me to bring a gun.
Right, and see, luckily Josh always carries, so he had one in the truck if we needed to run and grab it. So, I think one of the most interesting stories I remember them telling us about that place was about the ghost train that people have seen.
Yeah,
and I'm like, man, I was like, I would love to just witness that for just 10 seconds. And I remember another story Deborah had told us about. The guy was just there during the day, just kind of touring the grounds. And said this guy just kind of came up out of the woods, kind of looked like a hippie. We're just sitting there chatting with him for a couple of minutes and turned around and the guy was completely gone.
Wow.
And I'm like, so it's almost like you said, it's a portal, and it's just kind of sounds like a place where people just pass through, not just people that may have died there, like people just passing through trying to get where they're supposed to be going.
Yeah.
So it's a definitely interesting place. It's definitely up there on our list of most active places we've been to. So
yeah, one of the other interesting things that I thought that I'd never heard at any other location was they told us if you go outside and you see like the air is like shimmering or wavy looking, stay away from it, because they think it's kind of like a time slip or like a portal you could walk through.
Oh shit.
And they actually warned us about it. Yeah, like don't even during the day, at night, anytime, if you see the air on the grounds where it looks like it's kind of like the heat wave, coming off the pavement, like that wavy look. Yeah, don't go anywhere near it, because they don't know what it is, but they're like, you probably don't want no part of it.
Yeah, I don't think they warned us about that, so that's kind of good to know now. So at what age did you actually have your first like full on investigation, not just like touring around at a cemetery or abandoned house, like you're full on went with some people and actually investigated?
Probably at 18.
Where was that at?
Carton Plantation.
Okay, so you didn't have to break in this time.
We did sneak in there.
You did snuck in again, okay.
But it was more of like a structured investigation, because at that time like I said, I got that book, and 18, 19-ish. But yeah, we actually went in there. It was kind of more of a structured investigation instead of just trying to scare ourselves or any of that stuff. And we actually, I've experienced so many things at Carton Plantation, but that's when I kind of got really serious about, okay, I'm going to take people with me who are serious about it, that it's not just about scaring each other. It's not just about having fun as teenagers. That's when I kind of really got serious about it.
Right. That's kind of how I was probably around that age. I didn't actually have a full on investigation, but I knew it was something that I'd love to actually do this. And that was, same thing before the shows ever came out and all that stuff. So, because I guess we're probably around the same age. I just turned 38, so I think we're around the same age. So it was at that time, I was like, that's really cool. I love to do this. I'd love to travel, check out these haunted locations. So it was something we always talked about growing up. And of course, after Keith passed away in 2011, all that just kind of got, pushed back and stuff. And Waverly Hills was one of the places me and him always talked about going to. And I was like, that automatically jumped to the top of my bucket list of something I've got to do before I die. And so when I finally made it there in 2017, your meeting will end in 10 minutes. That's awesome. Okay. So when we finally made it there, I went with my mom and my stepdad. And when I walked in, I was like, this is something I got to do. And when the night ended, I was like, I don't care how long it takes me. I was like, I've got to get a team going. And it took a few years, but we finally got it going. Have you ever been to Waverly Hills?
I have. That's a crazy place too.
Man, I tell you,
Yeah.
I've been there 3 times. I went like 3 times in like 13 months and experienced different shit every single time.
Yeah.
So it's
Yeah.
one of those places where people have asked me, is like, what's one place, you weren't disappointed? I was like, I've never been disappointed there. I
Yeah.
was like, if you don't believe in the paranormal, I would go to this place. I was like, I think you'll come out 100% believer. If not 100% believer, your perception of it will be flipped a little bit. Because like my mom went in, she was one of those people who she kind of believed, but she was more on the skeptic side. And when we left that place that morning, she was like, I full on believe. She goes,
Yeah.
and so what's been your favorite investigation to date?
Probably Thomas House.
Thomas
I
House.
love that place in Red Bull Springs. Yeah, and that's probably the place that I would tell people that if you don't believe, Thomas House will make you a believer, especially because it's a bed and breakfast, so you spend the night there, and so you get the full experience. It's not just a 4 or 5 hour investigation or whatever. You're kind of there all night, and it never disappoints either. Waverly Hills doesn't, but the Thomas House is just I don't know. To me, it's a special place. And I think all of us investigators kind of have that. And it sounds like for you, it's probably Waverly Hills.
Yeah.
And for me, it's Thomas House. And we actually have an investigation, a 2-night investigation coming up here soon, August 19th to 20th, I believe. And it's going to be interesting to kind of live there for 2 days. And so.
See, there was another place me and my mom, my stepdad went. We did one of the ghost hunt weekends. And I gotta say, everybody I've talked to said that place is super active. Like nothing happened while we were there.
Wow.
I don't know if it was, because there were so many people there, or if it was just one of those, no pun intended, one of those dead nights.
Yeah.
And so I was like, man, that's kind of disappointing. Everybody's hyped this place up, and I was like, nothing's going on. But what's, this stuff doesn't happen when you want it to, more or less.
Right.
So I mean, I knew going in, I was like, could be a night where absolutely nothing happens, and we want to go back. We actually want to go back as a team, and I keep hearing they only allow the investigations during the ghost hunt weekends, but I've also heard you can do it without the ghost hunt weekends. Do you have any idea?
Yeah, you just have to. So ghost hunt weekend is kind of their bread and butter up there, which is good because it's helped them keep the place open. The owners, David and Miss Evelyn and David's brother, they're amazing people, and they live there. For anybody that's never been up there, they actually live in the Thomas House, but they have all these rooms. It's a bed and breakfast, like a hotel type deal. But yes, you just have to call and find a weekend that they're not doing ghost hunt weekends, or a night that they're not doing ghost hunt weekends. A lot of times you can go up there through the week, and Wednesday, Thursday night, they may let you come in there and stay and do an investigation. We're doing it. We actually, I'm a guest investigator with Medics for Paranormal. It's their event,
right?
But
right.
I'm a guest investigator, and Lee just found a weekend that ghost hunt weekends weren't going to be there.
Right.
And since we've been up there before, we kind of have a good relationship with David and Miss Evelyn, and they kind of know us and trust us. And so, but yeah, you just have to just call them up and, or go up there and meet them and say, hey, I'd love my team to come in here and, that type of stuff. But yeah, we've done a few events up there so far, but this one is going to be, I think I don't know how many tickets they sold per night, but it'll be 2 sets of people, 2 sets of guests, Friday and Saturday. So,
And you said that's what, next weekend?
August 19th and 20th, I believe, Friday and Saturday night.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm thinking of the Rosemont event they had to cancel, which was next weekend.
Yeah.
Because Lee was trying to get me to come up there because it's my wife's birthday next weekend. He's like, "Oh, your wife would love it." I was like, I don't know if she want to spend her whole weekend up there, but
Yeah.
my wife loves Rosemont. And we went up there. We've been up there a couple of times just during the day, and she absolutely loved it. We actually had wanted to get married there, and financial stuff came up and weren't able to do it. But she was like, I was like, maybe we can talk them into like maybe just coming up there one day and just taking some family portraits and stuff on the property. And now I know who is it. I'm drawing a blank on his name.
No, they have a new director.
Yeah, I can't. I'm trying to think of the old one's name. I went blank on his name.
Oh, Eli.
Eli, that's it. And
Yeah.
I told my wife, he's not over it anymore. She goes, well, I don't know if I want to go up there now. She goes, I really liked him. And so I was like, I'm sure it's all still the same, just a different person overseeing stuff. It's no big deal.
Yeah, and actually the board, from when I've talked to them, I got a good working relationship with the board that runs Rosemont. And from when I've talked to them, the new Eli kind of got them going on the paranormal stuff, especially during COVID, doing more paranormal stuff to keep the doors open during COVID. And the new director, she is more into the paranormal. So she's up for doing a lot more paranormal stuff. Of course, they're booked up year round with weddings and things like that. They're a really busy place, but yeah, she's down to do more paranormal stuff. So especially kind of outside the box events, the event that got canceled was they were going to do a camp out on the grounds there and have a campfire. And
I thought that was really cool.
Yeah, do an investigation. I think they just picked the wrong time of year. I tried to tell them, like, it's going to be too hot in August.
Yeah.
And so that's ultimately why they canceled it, because we've had all this, this heat, this really bad heat this year. But hopefully, maybe we can pick it back up in September or October or something. And
when it's a bit cooler out. So,
Yeah, I was going to be at that event as well. Even though I'm not part of their team, I do so much stuff with them.
Right? You're like an honorary member.
Yeah.
Now, speaking of teams, do you have like your own team, or you just kind of do your own thing, or do you have people that you normally go with?
I like to have the freedom to do my own thing, and also I get busy with doing appearances and things like that, with the podcast kind of getting crazy, and so I can't. The reason I'm not part of Medics for Paranormal is because I can't commit to going on every investigation with them. They do private homes and stuff like that too, and so I just can't commit to all that stuff because I have so much other stuff going on with the podcast and with other events that I do with like Alan Cersei and things like that. And also I like the freedom of being able to go with other teams to investigate, and I'm not kind of tethered to one team. But I do a lot of stuff with Medics for Paranormal just because we're friends, and I knew them long before Medics for Paranormal. We all used to work on the ambulance together. And so, we're all friends first and foremost, and then the paranormal stuff is just, kind of secondary.
Right.
But I like the freedom to kind of do whatever I want. And also I'm working on a book, so I'm going to be really busy with that when it comes out later on this year.
Oh, that's cool. I'll have to check that out.
Yeah. Small Town Haunts and Legends of Tennessee.
All right.
So I'm about halfway there.
There you go.
Yeah. Hopefully in the next month I can get it done and have it out by Halloween.
Yeah, I think we've actually talked about, you joining up with us sometime on an investigation. So,
I'd love to.
I know Lee's been wanting us to tag. He's been wanting us to tag team a place. So we've been discussing tag teaming, a big place like a hospital or a prison or something. So that way we can kind of be more spread out and not have that much contamination. So, actually we're returning to Brushy Mountain next year. That's one of our big things for next year. We plan on returning, so I may have to reach out to him and see if they want to team up for that.
That's one place I have not been is Brushy.
All right. So you said you've never been to Brushy Mountain.
I have not. I haven't had the opportunity. I'm fine with going and like taking the tour, but I want to go investigate. It's like $1,500 to rent the fucking place and investigate, which is ridiculous. I understand it's a big place, but come on. $1,500. That's insane.
Let's see, I think that's for a full night because when we went back in 2020, we only did like the 6 hour thing and it wasn't nearly as expensive. And we actually got there a little bit early because we was wanting to eat at the restaurant beforehand, and we got there too late. They had just closed, and so we just drove on up, and they were like, "Hey, y'all are already here. Let's go ahead and get started." So we got like 2 extra hours, which was really cool.
Oh, that's cool.
But yeah, a lot of these places, especially the bigger locations, they're pretty pricey. But I also understand the reasoning behind it. So like when it's a bigger place, it's the more people you have, the cheaper it is on everybody. But I, like you said, some of the prices though are pretty outrageous. I contacted a place just a couple of days ago. I can't remember who it was now, but it was like $1,900 for
Wow.
like 5 or 6 hours. I was like, no. I don't know about all that. I was like, if it's gonna be worth the price of admission, if I'm paying my hard-earned money, I at least want to be in there for a good 7, 8, 9 hours.
Yeah. And with Brescia, I can understand a little more because you can take a lot of people to make it affordable because it's such a big place that you can kind of spread out. But yeah, some of these other places that are smaller that charge $500-$600 for a night, they let you go from like, 9 to 2 or something like that. Like, that's okay. That's a little ridiculous. It's like a 2-story house,
Right.
know?
So,
and like you can't take that many people because of contamination and all that, and you really can't give EVPs and that type of stuff. One place in particular I went, I was a guest. They needed somebody else to go to make it $50 a piece, so there was 10 of us in the little bitty 2-story house that I'm talking about, and I'm not going to say the name of it because I like the place, but yeah, it was a little too steep. I don't know if I would go there and with 4 or 5 of us and pay $500 for the night. We had activity, but at the same time, there's way too many people in there to make it affordable.
Yeah. And some of these smaller places, it's hard to get good stuff because, you may have somebody down on the bottom floor that's a real loud talker, and they just can't help talking that loud. And I mean, I understand that too. Have you been to the Old Scott County Jail yet?
Oh yeah, that place is amazing.
It's a smaller place.
Yeah.
And so, no more than probably 3 or 4 people would be good in there.
Yeah.
And even if you're on each floor, as long as you're not talking really loud, you're not really going to get that much contamination.
Yeah.
We're going back there the 1st of October. That's going to be the first place we've investigated twice. And for obvious reasons, that I mean, you've seen the video. I think you were one of the first people I sent it to after, even just from the recording off my little camera.
Oh yeah, no, I had you on the show like the next day. You also had the paranormal hangover. Yeah, I had you on my podcast.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Yeah, we were suffering pretty good, but it was all worth it. And now what's crazy is we went out there this past Sunday. My wife Kelly and we took our 2 youngest kids out there just to because my wife wanted to check it out during the day before we went out there to investigate it. And of course, we got to talking about what happened that night, and now they've actually incorporated that video into their ghost tours and their ghost walks. And anytime a team comes out, they show them that stuff, and they're like, this is some stuff that can happen here. Here's proof what happened.
Yeah.
And they actually told me that some of the other stuff we experienced that night, we were the first people to experience it, and then there's been other teams that's experienced the same thing. Like our Ovulus was more or less directing us to read this article on the wall. They said that's happened to more teams since then, and so it's one of probably my favorite place so far. And not just because of what happened, the history of the building and what they've turned it into. And actually I donated one of Keith's hats. His hats one of his hats is on display in there, so it has a lot of special meaning to me. So
yeah, that place it definitely doesn't disappoint with us. I investigated with my buddy from Yin and Yang Paranormal, Caleb, and there were 5 of us, and there were two of the guys went upstairs the 3rd floor, and we were on the 1st floor. So we tried to kind of keep a floor between us while we were investigating, but we had a laser grid move on its own.
Oh wow!
On video, yeah.
Oh shit!
And I straight up heard we were doing an Estes method up on the 3rd floor, and there were 3 of us, and the 2 other guys were on the 1st floor. And so I was asking the questions for the Estes method. And for anybody that doesn't know Estes method, you're blindfolded, you got headphones on, and you're listening to the spirit box cycle through the white noise of the radio. So that person can't hear the questions you're asking, and they spit out whatever they hear. And a lot of times you get good results with names or answers and things like that. But out in the hallway, while we're doing this Estes method, we're in one of the cells, all 3 of us. Out in the hallway, I hear a man clear his throat and hear a voice, and I caught the clearing of the throat, and it sounds like, even though I heard it down the hallway, on my audio, it sounds like he's right next to the microphone.
That's wild.
And it was so loud that I looked at the other dude and I was like, "Did you hear that?" He's like, "Yeah." And I walked out in the hall to make sure there's nobody down the hall, but the other guys were downstairs, and so that was interesting. We were doing an Estes method on the 1st floor, and heard a door slam right behind us.
Oh wow!
And I walked out, and there's no door slammed. I even walked into where Miranda was hanging out and asked her if she had come out of the office space there, the little gift shop, because there's a big heavy big heavy steel door there. She's like, no. And she had her headphones on, she didn't hear it, but we caught it on audio as well. And we got lots of EVPs. One of the EVPs that we got that's pretty loud was I was asking, do you want a cigarette? And I was setting it up kind of on the bars of the cell. And in the background, you can hear a guy say, yeah, really loud.
That's pretty cool.
But yeah, the moving of the laser grid was crazy because it doesn't fall over. It just kind of rotates.
Huh.
And we're all out in the hallway, and you can see us all go out in the hallway, and it was inside a cell. But yeah, that's pretty interesting.
Place seems to be very active. And from what Chris and Miranda's told me, just in general conversation, like, stuff happens all the time.
Yeah.
Like, they'll just be there, doing their thing during the day, and they'll hear people talking and walking around. And so it's definitely, if anybody listening has never been there and you're into this stuff, go to Huntsville, Tennessee, to the historic Scott County Jail. I don't think you'll leave disappointed.
No, not at all. It's not too far from Knoxville.
No, it's 45 minutes or so, if that.
Yeah,
maybe an hour.
Yeah.
And so, so what's one place that you've been to that you think you'll never go back because you were just super let down by it for whatever reason?
I don't know if I've been. I don't get let down by places, I don't think, because I don't go in with the expectation that all this craziness is going to happen. I don't know if I have those places that I just say I wouldn't go back to. My motto in investigating is I'm going into, and I don't know where I heard this, but I've kind of taken it to heart. We don't go in to investigate a haunting. We go investigate stories of a haunting. Because until you have the experience yourself, I don't know if it's haunted or not. I'm just listening to what other people say. And I'll never discount what somebody else says because I wasn't there and didn't have the experience. And I don't want people to discount what I say, experiences I've had either. But going in and investigating the stories of a haunting, I think if you go in with that mentality, you're not kind of let down. And I try not to believe all the hype of a place, especially when I've seen it on TV. But I don't know if there's any place that I wouldn't go back to. I'm trying to think. I've been to so many places over the years. I mean, there's been places, like I said, where it hadn't had activity. But that doesn't mean I wouldn't go back, because sometimes I also know that sometimes there's just not activity.
Right.
It's just hit it on the wrong night.
See, and I love that answer. That's what a lot of people don't understand. Because they see all these shows, so they're thinking, I'm going to go to these places and all this crazy shit's going to happen, and it doesn't.
Right.
We've been to places where absolutely nothing has happened. Like our first official investigation after Brushy, after we started the team, we went to Ripavilla Plantation in Spring Hill. It was one of those dead nights. The only thing I can actually remember is it felt like something tugged on my shirt at one point. Kind of spooked me a little bit. I jumped, and of course there's nothing there. I thought maybe, because there was a plant hanging behind me. I was like, maybe that I bumped into that plant. Yeah. But I mean, it was one of those nights where about midnight, me and Josh sat down on a couch and we ended up falling asleep. I mean, that's how that was how dead it was. So, but I don't think they allow investigations there anymore. I think some new people took it over, and I don't think they allow that anymore. But
yeah, the Franklin Battlefield Trust, who runs Carton Plantation and Carter House, have taken it over, and that the director is a historian, the guy who runs the Franklin Battlefield Trust, and he doesn't want any part of the paranormal whatsoever.
yeah,
So they actually, I just saw an article where the Franklin Battlefield Trust said that all three of their properties, they're going to get away from even doing weddings and things and events like that, weddings and concerts, because Carton Plantation used to do a lot of weddings,
right.
and they're going to get away from doing that and put more money into the history side of things, which I think is cool. But at the same time, they're missing out on a lot of money for the paranormal.
Oh yeah.
I mean,
that's what I can understand about some of these places. I'm like, you say you're struggling to keep your doors open, or to get this and to do that. I'm like, you have a moneymaker sitting in your lap,
right?
And I understand you don't want that quote unquote negative attention about your place, but I'm like, if you're needing money, I was like, you have a perfect opportunity just sitting there that you should jump on. So, like the place in Dixon we've been trying to get into, the Clement Railroad Museum, the old Clement. They I'd reached out to them, back in 2020 when we started, and they were like, oh, you can come out, but you have to do it during the week, and you can only do it for like 3 hours, and we're going to charge you like X amount of dollars. And I'm like, what? And I was like, for that amount of money, I was like, I want to be in here at least 7 hours, 8 hours.
Right.
And I want it to be after downtown is pretty much dead for the night.
Right.
They were wanting us to come in at like 5 PM and do it till like 9 o'clock. I was like, no. I was like, downtown Dixon, even during the week, doesn't really kind of die down until about 6 or 7.
Yeah.
I was like, so you're going to have all this outside contamination, and when it finally gets quiet, I'm going to have an hour left to do something. I was like, no. I have reached out to him again here recently and pitched an idea to him, and the director was on board for it. So I don't know, what's going to happen with that. I want to do like an event there, like they do at Rosemont and stuff. I know it's not a very big building, so it'd be very limited people that could do it.
Yeah.
But I've also thought about getting to some of the other buildings downtown that I know are haunted and kind of doing maybe like a ghost walk or something.
Yeah.
Maybe have some people stationed here, some people stationed there, do like a little mini investigation, and then have people just swap out. So I thought about trying to get that put together. So I've heard like all of downtown Dixon is haunted. So
I get asked about Dixon a lot, and I'm like, well, there's as far as I know, there's not a lot of stories other than from like Clement Railroad Museum, because a lot of people are tight-lipped about things that happen. But it's just like any of these other small towns, like Franklin, Tennessee, or my mind just went blank. Gallatin, or all these town squares, they have all this history. They've burned down multiple times, all of them, Murfreesboro, and they have all this history of bad things happening. And so all the buildings, if they're old enough, they're going to be haunted. I mean, downtown Dixon's been around for I think the Clement Railroad Museum was built like it was built before, well, the actual original train stop was built during the Civil War for the train depot for a stop. And it kind of, Dixon was built up in the late 1800s, kind of around all the furnaces, all the iron furnaces, having to ship out their ore and stuff. So so Dixon's been around for a long time. So but all those people are kind of tight-lipped about it.
Yeah.
And nobody's kind of tried to dive in like you are to get them to open up about it. So, but I get asked about Dixon all the time. I'm like, I can kind of tell you about the Clement Railroad Museum, but other than that, people don't really talk a whole lot about the hauntings.
So like I know, obviously the Clement Railroad's haunted, and the 3 places we investigated, House of Brews, House of Vines, which just recently shut down, and Events on Main, I know they're all haunted. I've been told Xander's is haunted. Apparently, I think on the very top floor, they used to store bodies for like Taylor's funeral home, like when they had more than they could handle. And I know Taylor's funeral home's haunted. Hell, I've experienced shit in there just, being there for a funeral. That
Yeah.
place gives you the creeps as soon as you walk in, and not just because it's a funeral home. Like, I've always been weirded out by that place.
And it's been a funeral home for many, many, many
Oh
years.
yeah. And
Yeah.
so with that said, how how do you get involved doing these events? Do you just pitch the idea to them, or do they come to you guys, or how do y'all go about whenever you want us to do
So
an event somewhere?
it's us pitching ideas. And it's kind of a domino snowball effect. The more you do, the more they can go back and look and say, oh, well, they do these successful events or whatever, But yeah, it's just going to pitching ideas. If you don't ask, you don't know.
Right.
And the worst thing they're going to tell you is no.
Yeah.
I mean, that's how I approach podcasting too. I get people ask me, well, how'd you get this or that guest on? I asked.
Right.
I don't know what you want to tell you. I didn't do anything special, and I'm not on TV or anything. But
Yeah.
yeah, we just go and ask.
Right.
We tell them, okay, well, we want to sell tickets for this amount of money. This is what we're going to come in and do, whether it's provide dinner or whatever. And this is kind of what we do. And we do an investigation with this many people, and we'll give you this much money.
Right.
And so a lot of the places will look at that as, even though they couldn't care less about the paranormal, they'll look at it like, okay, well, we're going to make, this much money in this amount of time. We don't have to do anything,
Right.
Just have one person there to kind of, oversee everything and, keep the building open while we're there. But, yeah, for the most part, it's just pitching the ideas, and a lot of places are open to it. Even ones that, I haven't had time here lately to go to some of the smaller places that I want to try to get into investigate. But yeah, some of them are really open to it, especially when it comes from the like raising money aspect. Most of these historic places are, for the most part, they run off their own kind of tourist dollars of people walking in the door taking a tour.
Mm-hmm.
And so but also you never know, so they may never have been approached by anybody.
Right.
And a lot of times it's a respect thing. So if they see that you're a respected member of like the paranormal community, and you're respectful when you talk to them, and you have a sound plan, and you can answer any questions they have, that goes a long way in them being like, okay, maybe we can do this, even though they maybe haven't done it before.
Yeah. All right. So you'd mentioned a book earlier.
Yeah.
Talking about small towns and stuff. Are you going to include the legend of Werewolf Springs?
It will be in there. So will the White Bluff Screamer.
Okay. See that the Werewolf Springs is kind of where we more or less cut our teeth on investigating. Because all the rumors of it being haunted, and of course the crazy backstory. the craziest thing I remember happening there. It was in the middle of the night, 1-2 o'clock in the morning. Me and Keith were out there, and his girlfriend was with us, and all we had was a little recorder, ones with the little bitty tapes in it.
Yeah.
So we're just walking around in the middle of the night, and I remember him asking, if there's anybody out here with us, just do something or say something just to let us know you're here. And so when we wrapped up the night, our night, we went back to downtown Dixon and started listening to this recorder. And whenever he come across that question, after he asked it sounds like a little girl comes through clear as fucking day and says, "Good morning." And it's like 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, and
right.
We listened to it over and over and over again. I was like, that had to have been, your girl. He's like, no, that's not her. That's a little girl talking. And that was the first thing we ever actually captured. And we were just like blown away by it. And then I don't remember when it was, but there was another night we was out there. It was me and Keith and Josh and 2 or 3 of our other friends. And I actually had a video camera, an old VHS, one of the small video cameras. And we're walking around all night, and we didn't hear it at the time. But when me and Josh go back to my house, we're watching the tape, and my dumbass didn't take the lens cover off. So it's 45 minutes of just us talking, but nothing but blackness. But we hear this old train whistle, like not like a modern day train, like an old like steam whistle, like in the distance.
Yeah.
And I know there's some train tracks fairly close by, but we would have heard the train if there was a train coming through. But like I said, this was like an old, like late 1800s, like steam whistle. And we listened to this thing over and over again, and we were just like blown away by it. I was like, man, I know we would have heard that if it happened, actually happened, we would have heard that. And so that place is just, it's always been really weird. And now I don't know if you've been out there lately, but now they got all these houses built up going down that road and stuff.
Yeah.
And it's
big, expensive houses too.
Yeah.
But the graveyard there, and Werewolf Springs is actually called Hall Springs.
Yeah.
The nickname is Werewolf Springs.
Yeah.
But yeah, when I went out there earlier in the spring, went out there to take some pictures because it's going to be in my book. So, but some of those graves, I didn't realize it. I hadn't been out there in a long time, but some of those graves date back to like the late 1700s. In the very back of the cemetery, and you can barely read some of them, but there's a lot of like old graves back there.
Oh yeah,
in that cemetery. And then the springs itself is really cool because the original rock wall is kind of still around it where it bubbles up out of the ground, and in that area. And of course the cabin is long gone, but they have like a primitive shelter there now that you can actually, I'm guessing you can go out there and spend the night.
Oh, really?
I don't know why. Yeah, because it's one of those primitive shelters open in the front, but it's closed on the other sides and has a roof.
Okay.
So I'm guessing you can spend the night out there. I don't know why they would have a primitive shelter out there if they didn't want you to.
Right.
There's also I think a picnic table and a grill out there now.
Huh.
Like you see around the parks, like the permanent charcoal grills. Yeah. But yeah, that place it's interesting. It's definitely interesting energy to walk back through the woods there. I'm always fascinated by the history. I love the history of places. And so to walk in that area that was settled that long ago and think how many people, the people making their living there, and just kind of imagine the families collecting water out of the spring and, in this beautiful place. Because it's really pretty back there with the spring bubbling up and going into the creek and running. And so, but just the history of it, and to think we're walking in the footsteps of these same people that we've heard these crazy stories about that, may or may not be true. Who knows? Right. But it's a good story. Yeah. The Werewolf Springs, it's a good story. Yeah. And I found that story kind of intertwines with the White Bluff Screamer. The White Bluff Screamer is about three different stories. One's an actual Bigfoot, a white Bigfoot.
Huh.
That I've heard about. And Ken Gerhardt, the famous cryptozoologist, when I talked to him on my show, I knew the White Bluff Screamer story was in his book, and I asked him about it because Ken's from Texas. So I'm like, how did you hear about the White Bluff Screamer in little bitty White Bluff, Tennessee?
Right.
But the story he put in his book, he got from a lady who was at a creek, and she got too drunk to drive home. So she fell asleep in her car, and she woke up in the middle of the night with this big, giant white Bigfoot yelling at her.
Wow.
So that's the White Bluff Screamer story that Ken has in his book. And of course I'm paraphrasing. There's a lot more to the story.
Right.
But then you have, the lady that chases your car down Trace Creek Road. That's the White Bluff Screamer.
Yeah, I've heard that. I've heard that one too. Yeah.
Yeah. And scream at you. And then there's another Werewolf Springs type story about a cabin that sits back up in the woods, an old cabin on Trace Creek in White Bluff. That is kind of the same story as Werewolf Springs. And they attribute that to being the White Bluff Screamer. The other story is that, and the circus train really did crash in White Bluff back in like the early 1900s.
Right.
And a bunch of animals got loose. And so then you have that story of the something real that happened. And you had all these animals and stuff get loose. And so where they think, the historians think the story of the White Bluff Screamer comes from the actual like lady chasing you, or if you're out in the woods you see this white thing screaming at you. They think that back then that some llamas or alpacas got loose, and they scream and they're white. Right. And so they think that's how the White Bluff Screamer got started, was people were seeing these llamas or whatever in the woods, and people didn't have TV and stuff, so they didn't know what a llama looked like back then. And so it's interesting, the derivation of and the intertwining of those two stories between the White Bluff Screamer and Werewolf Springs. And the more I've dove into it for the book, like I said, I uncovered all these different stories, which is pretty interesting.
Right. And even if none of that stuff's true, other than the actual train wreck, it makes for a really great urban legend. So
yeah.
And I mean, I do think that cemetery's haunted. 'Cause like I said, we've experienced some
Oh,
weird
yeah.
shit out there. So,
Well, and the fact that the area has been settled since late 1700s,
yeah.
there's lots of history on that land there for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So,
I'd be curious if some of those big ass new houses that are like $1 million houses out there. I'd be curious if
yeah.
some of those had some activity,
Yeah.
just being in proximity, on that land.
I've wondered that too. And see, and I hadn't went out there in years. And then when I drove out there one day, all these houses was here. I was like, what is this mess? And it kind of watered down the creepiness in a way. Because, before all that, there was those 2-3 houses on that whole road.
Yeah.
So, and
the road was a bit creepier because it was just fields and woods. Yeah. Yeah.
So, all right. One location you haven't been that you have to get to before you call it quits.
I just scratched one of those off my list, actually. I went to St. Augustine on vacation and got to do a private investigation of the Castillo de San Marcos, the big fort, the big coquina fort. Also got to investigate the Ripley's Believe It or Not Museum, which is very cool.
Yeah, I remember. I think I don't know if you posted about it, but I think Caleb I'd seen Caleb had tagged you in some stuff too. I was like, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, and that's the original Ripley's Believe It or Not Museum. It was the first one. It's actually called Castle Warden. But interesting history there. What's another one that I want to scratch off? Probably the Conjuring House.
Oh yeah,
that's probably my big one. A new owner just took it over and is doing a bunch more good things with it. But just talking to Andrea Perrin on my show and hearing her experiences, and then I had the people from the Sleepless Unrest when they did the documentary out there, Brian and Rochelle from Ghost Hunters, and then Kendall and Vera Welpton, and just hearing their stories. They lived there for like a whole month and filmed the documentary, and so they had some crazy stuff happen. But yeah, that house just being so notorious, and I've heard stories from people that I respect. Like I said before, I wouldn't go out there believing the hype,
right,
per se, but I would still have the stories from like Andrea Perrin, because she actually lived there for half her life.
Right.
Like, all this crazy shit really happened to her and her family in this house, and so that would probably be the one that I definitely would love to go out there.
That's definitely on my list too. I think for me personally, I think my top has to be Trans-Allegheny. I mean, just the history behind it. There was so much tragedy there. There's no way you can't go in there and not have something happen.
Right.
And that's one of those places that's so huge. Like, I don't think you'd be able to even scratch a surface just being there like a week. I think you'd have to spend like a good month there to really dive deep into that place. But that's always been one of my tops. And maybe I'll make it there one day. That might be one of those places where some of us might have to team up to tackle that beast of a building. So
yeah, but that place, I mean, there's so many buildings still left standing, and the big main building is so big that hell, you could be there for 2 or 3 days with 3 or 4 teams and not even see each other.
Right.
Because that place is just massive. Another place that I'd love to go would be Alcatraz.
Oh yeah.
I think just because of the notorious and infamous people that were there,
right,
and the escape and all that stuff. I think that would just, the history there with Al Capone and all that. I think it'd just be a really cool, even if they didn't catch anything, it would just be cool to say, I investigated Alcatraz.
Right.
Yeah.
That would be wild. Yeah. So where can people find you if they're trying to look for you online?
I am everywhere. I'm all over social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. On Facebook, you can find the Unseen Paranormal Podcast. I have a group as well, but you can find that page, or you can find me at the Eric Freeman Sims. Instagram, I believe it's the Unseen Paranormal Podcast. And then on Twitter, I think it's at the Unseen Para. And then my show, you can find anywhere you find podcast or music. Spotify, Apple, iHeartRadio, Pandora, Stitcher, all your podcatchers. I'm kind of everywhere. And I have a website also, unseenparanormalpodcast.com. Go there and you can listen to episodes there and see what's going on. I got to revamp my t-shirt business on there. I haven't messed with it since Christmas of last year. So, but you can still order shirts on there if you like a shirt.
All right. So what all you got coming up? I know you got the book releasing pretty soon. What else you got going on coming up?
So about a month ago, I finished season 2 of the Unseen Paranormal Podcast. I'm probably pick it back up in the middle of September. for season 3. Got the Thomas House, like I was talking about, investigation coming up. I think that's the only investigation that I have coming up here soon. Pretty much my focus is going to be on finishing the book so I can have it out into September, 1st of October for spooky season.
There you go.
Yeah,
I'll definitely have to get a copy of that.
Yeah, I found some interesting stuff, and like I was talking about before, I'm huge into the history of places too, and I found not only interesting hauntings but interesting history. That even being from Tennessee, I'm like, I never heard this shit. Why didn't they teach this in high school? I would have been a lot more into the history, if they would have taught about Fielding Hearst and like all these other people from the Civil War that you never heard of, and not just Civil War, but just throughout history of Tennessee. And so that's kind of what I went into the book, and that's why it's Small Town Haunts and Legends, because I wanted to do things that people hadn't heard of. Right. So when you read the book, you're not going to find the Bell Witch. There's plenty of books been written on the Bell Witch. You won't find anything for Nashville, Memphis, Knoxville, Chattanooga. It's all the small town things that people, local legends and things. And I somebody asked me, are you putting true stories in the book? And I'm like, well, I don't know how true you can say paranormal stuff is, because it gets, it's like the telephone game. With a lot of these stories, they become local legends. I'm like, it's about the history and the storytelling.
Right.
And the entertainment part is the hauntings. I can't discount what other people say happened to them in a place. Like I said before, I don't want them discounting what I say has happened to me. So I don't know if the stories are true. That's my honest answer. But hopefully people are entertained by the book, and I'm trying to do my best to put mostly true things in there. All the history will be true. Right.
Like I said, I'll definitely have to pick up a copy and check it out. So soon you'll be introduced as an investigator, podcast host, and author. So that's pretty badass.
That's one of my bucket list things. Was always wanted to be an author, and the paranormal was kind of giving me that thing.
There you go. Well, Eric, man, I appreciate you being on and being my first official guest. I hope to have this.
Thanks for having me on. I love talking paranormal, and me and you always have great chats anyway.
Yeah. Hopefully I'll have this uploaded, fairly soon, and get this thing figured out. So, all right, guys, that's going to wrap it up for this episode. Again, thanks to my guest, Eric Freeman Sims. You can look him up on all those links. So give him a look up, give him a follow, and all that fun stuff. And we'll talk to you next time.